Welcome to AUA Leadership in Business, an official podcast of the American Urological Association.
Welcome to the AUA Leadership in Business podcast, where urologic professionals experience the practical application of business acumen essential for success in today's dynamic professional landscape. I'm Dr. Jennifer Miles Thomas, and in today's episode, we will discuss how to prepare for a urology interview from your first job to the C-suite. Joining me today for this discussion is Dr. Stephen Jones. Dr. Jones is president and CEO of Inova Health System, Northern Virginia's nonprofit healthcare system. He is a board-certified practicing urologic surgeon. He is also a professor of urology at the University of Virginia. Inova has received straight A ratings by Leapfrog since 2018, and in 2020 became the first and only large health system in America to have every hospital rated 5 stars by CMS. Dr. Jones previously served as president of Cleveland Clinic Regional Hospitals and Family Health Centers, and before that, he was department chair and held the Leonard Horvitz and Samuel Miller Distinguished Chair in Urologic Oncology, which has now been renamed the J. Stephen Jones Distinguished Chair, to be held in perpetuity by the sitting Cleveland Clinic Urology Department Chair. Welcome, Dr. Jones.
Thank you. My pleasure to join you.
Well, this is going to be a very, very interesting discussion. I think a lot of us in medicine, and especially urology, are making transitions. We're looking to improve and learn about leadership and recognize the need to make progressions in our careers. And so can you just start with sharing your journey, just from your first job to now as your current position of president and CEO of Inova Health?
Yeah, I'm glad to share, and it's certainly been an accidental journey. As a kid who grew up on the banks of the Arkansas River, driving tractors and carrying hay, I never had an idea to become a physician, let alone enjoy the career that I've been able to enjoy. And when I graduated college, realistically, there in small town Arkansas at that point in time, if you were a smart kid and someone who was good with people, there were a limited number of opportunities, and medicine was appeared to be that. But I didn't know anybody. I mean, I knew the guy that sewed my finger up a couple times, and I got it caught in farm machinery. It was about the only medical background I had. But ended up at Vanderbilt, and that was really the place where I regard that I grew up as a urology residency at Vanderbilt in 6 years, really learning to understand how to relate to people, patients, and otherwise, how to focus on excellence, learn the value of academics. And that really, I think, if you look at any point in my career, probably set me up for anything that happened to me after that. When I started practice in 1992, it was actually when Medicare had there was kind of Medicare change going on. All the groups in the country were afraid to hire anybody because they were afraid that reimbursements are all going to go away. And that sounds familiar. We still deal with that, a long time later. So I joined a small private practice group in Springfield, Missouri, and it was one of the best things that could happen to me because I was able to operate 5 or 6 days a week, really able to develop a subspecialty in my love for urologic oncology, but got that experience I probably couldn't have had in other settings. And then 7 years later, had the opportunity to join Cleveland Clinic. Of course, a very different setting. And when I first joined Cleveland Clinic, I really went in, as we say often, the person who loads the trucks, just the person who took clinical care and tried to be in the operating room as much as possible. But I also had always had the interest in academics, so took that opportunity to build an academic career, ultimately publishing over 200 peer-reviewed manuscripts and really directly the work that we did. I wasn't involved in fruit flies or esoteric things as much as the clinical work that urologists need to understand how to do better. And then over time was just asked to do enough different things that suddenly you look up and boy, you're kind of running a big part of the organization. My last role in Cleveland after being department chair for 5 years was actually leading the regional hospital system. So basically the Ohio market, I was lead for that and had no intent to ever leave. It's a great organization and a great place to have a career. But I got a call with a unique opportunity in Northern Virginia, which is really the DC suburbs. If you think about where we are at Inova. And in that, I saw the opportunity to take an organization that was doing a lot of things at a very high level, extraordinary medical care, but not brought together as a system. And that's one thing I learned in Cleveland is the value of being a system. And when I was brought in specifically to make a system focused on excellence, focused on the people, patients and our team members, and a moderately academic organization, but nowhere to the degree of a traditional academic medical center. So it was really a great fit for me. And so 6 years I came here, a little over 6 years, came here and have had the opportunity to truly take that system and have it measurably delivering some, if not the best healthcare in America, not just urology, but across the spectrum of all the care that we deliver. And being CEO by itself has been a journey that if you'd have caught me on the Arkansas River banks 40 years ago, you would have never seen possible. But through that, the opportunities I've been given, I've been able to do some things that I can't believe how fortunate I've been.
Well, that's an amazing journey. You've really been through most of the aspects of urology, and it didn't even start with the idea of one becoming a doctor, but there's something that was in you that one, it looks like you're a lifetime learner. You were able to adapt to new environments and situations, and you kept saying yes. So tell me about why you said yes. You made big changes. You went from small town to bigger city to large health system to running a region. Why did you keep saying yes? Can you talk about the different practices and what you think you've learned from each of them?
Yeah, I think first of all, you nailed it right there. You probably just said it as well or better than I could. I interestingly just finished a book by Admiral McCraven last night, the night before we recorded this, and it was just a little quick book that a colleague had given me. And in the last chapter, he made the statement. One of the junior officers had asked, "How do you become admiral?" And he said, you work hard. You're a lifetime learner. I love, Jennifer, your verbiage on that. An insatiable thirst for knowledge, I think, is something that is invaluable. You say yes, you lean in, you value people, you support your own people, and you support those above you. And the junior officer said, "So that's how you become admiral?" He said, "No, that's how you become lieutenant. You just keep repeating that at every stage along the way." And I think when I look at the saying yes and the just showing up, those things sound kind of trite when you hear some talking head, maybe like me talking about them. But my first opportunity at leadership was when I first went in practice. I had trained when lasers were the new, whiz bang thing. Now, that's kind of scary, but there's always some new whiz bang thing, and I guarantee there will be more for the rest of all your careers. There will be new shiny things, but no one else knew how to use a YAG laser. So the hospital wanted to start a program. Well, my first year in practice, I was asked to lead that program because I was the only one who actually knew how to even use it. So you said yes, and then you're asked to do something in the operating room regarding turnover or efficiency. I got to the Cleveland Clinic. I was asked to chair the OR utilization task force, which is a glorious way of saying, figure out a way to tell your partners not to use expensive stents and trocars and stuff like that. And you can imagine how much fun that was, telling you all know who my colleagues at Cleveland Clinic were, to tell Steve Stream that, you can't use that, $50 stent when the $10 one works as well. That was not a lot of fun. But you keep saying yes. I think you've nailed it there. Just continue to learn and continue to say, I want to contribute. And you get to do these things. I think also there are a lot of people who don't want to do that. They want to just, as I say, load the trucks, just take care of patients all day. And that's a great career. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with not wanting to be a leader. But if you want to be a leader, you have to do those things and lean in and do those things. And again, I'll go back to that lifetime learner. I think you can't overestimate.
I completely agree, and a very exciting journey. Well, if we start at the very beginning, so for our listeners that are looking for their first job out of residency, how did you even start? How did you begin? What are your recommendations for that first interview?
I think the important thing, it's a very different era. So, we should be honest with ourselves in that first. So, for example, at that time, there were two choices. You were academics or private practice. Just pick a card. And even at that time, I will acknowledge, I always thought that was a completely separate dichotomy, if you will, that when you look at people who were in academics and they're looking at people in private practice, well, they don't work hard, or they golf on Wednesdays, or some of those things that some of the folks in that setting would do. Then you talk to the folks in private practice, which I joined at that point. Well, those academics, they have the residents doing all their work for them, and all they're doing is writing papers and going home at 4. And you look across the board and go, neither one of those is true. Both those groups are working their tails off, and they're both taking care of real patients. I had when I move on to the next phase in Cleveland Clinic, I remember at one point talking, we were getting very heavy into active surveillance for prostate cancer. And one of a group of the private practice docs were going, well, you can do that at a place like Cleveland Clinic, but we have real patients. And I'm going, well, hold on now. My patients have about the same number of prostates you're due. And that, and realistically, we're all taking care of patients. We're all doing similar things. And yes, some people may focus more on writing and research, and some people may focus more on, making sure we get the longest hours we can run in the day in clinic. But at the end of the day, I think our similarities are so much more than our differences that I think that people misinterpret that. So, but in thinking about getting ready for my first job interview at that point, it was really just about relationships. It was, you knew somebody, they were looking for a junior partner. Someone said, oh yeah, this resident's really good. I've seen him, do a cystectomy and whatnot. And the groups, you'd find someone who knew that group and says, yes, they're a good, solid group that I'd be willing to share patients with. That, kind of relationship was so key at that point. Fast forward 40 years later, the relationships is at least as important, if not more now, but it's in really understanding who would you want to spend your day around and what kind of work do you want to spend your day around, as opposed to, I want to be an academic or private practice, or I want to be in a private equity owned group versus an independent group, is to think, how do I want to spend my day and what type of people do I want to be around? Because you're going to work your backside off and you're going to work long hours, even if you think you're going to, control your work-life balance. Guess what? None of us really adequately does that. And so really think, where do you want to spend a lot of your time, more time than you spend with your own family or your own hobbies, and figure out that right setting, and then figure out the relationships to that, including in the interview. It's still about establishing a relationship, because you're trying to convince that person on the other side of the table, or maybe the other side of the Zoom even more at this point. You're trying to convince them. They want you to be around them all day. You're going to make their world better by being part of that. And so I think it's important for both groups to say, we're both selling something here. We're both selling being around us, whether you're the candidate or the group. But that relationship ultimately, I think, makes things work or not. And if you go into a setting that you like the idea, I want to work in this type of practice environment, but you really don't want to work around the people who are in that, the specific people who are there, it's just not going to work. And I think you have to be honest with yourself on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think as you mature as a person and professionally, you realize everything is relationships. Urology is a very, very small world. Well, did you find yourself knowing that there were different types of practice settings, tweaking your CV or the interview style based upon that? Or were you the same with every opportunity?
Well, I think part of my own personal brand is authenticity. And I think it served me well. It served me well clinically. So the reason that when I was at Cleveland Clinic, my most active, clinical years, I saw the people whose family members work in the operating room. I saw the folks who mopped up the operating room, who were clearly not at the same level of visibility and affluence of many of the other folks on the team. And by the same token, I took care of, whether it be sports heroes or CEOs or the other doctors at Cleveland Clinic, because I was going to be the same person. If you were going to see me for, a radical prostatectomy, or just if you had orcalgia, and by the way, if you think you're not going to see orcalgia in your new job, guess what? We all do. I still occasionally see those patients in the clinic, hopefully not as a solo complaint. But you're going to get that same care. I think that authenticity has just been something that's been a part of my brand, that, you and I met, in a panel a year or two ago. You saw the same person now you're going to see today, or if we run into each other at the bar after whatever at the AUA 3 years from now. I think that authenticity is part of my brand. So in that interview, of course, you're going to be a little more formal in the interview than you are at the party after the deal, but you're still that same person. And if people perceive that you're not that same person in those two settings, well, then how are you going to be 3 months from now when suddenly you're in my clinic down the hall from me, sharing a nurse or an MA with me? If you're going to be that different now, or how different are you going to be when you're in the building and now trying to figure out whether you were the right person to affiliate with? So I encourage people, lean into your authenticity. It goes to how I think many of us, not all of us, unfortunately, many of us is really focused on, inclusion and belonging is that regardless of where we are, if we can be ourselves, if we can belong, then we're likely to be way more likely to be successful than if we're in a place where we're having to pretend who we are. And I think that authenticity, whoever we are, serves us all so well. And I probably am way clearer about that now than I would have been when I was just a resident coming out trying to find a way to feed my family.
Yeah, I think that is sage advice. You've seen a lot, you've been through a lot, and it comes down to the fundamentals of be yourself, be authentic, and people will like you, not the image that you want to portray.
Yeah, and in fact, I would probably follow up on that. People will like you or they won't. But you,
Okay.
you but you trying to be somebody else is not going to make them like you because they're going to see through it. They know who you really are. Whether you know they know it, they're going to know it. So that's where I think if they get to choose, they don't want to like you. Okay, that's fine. And then indeed, in my career, I've had plenty of patients who over time it wasn't a good match, and it was like, oh, it's all gut wrenching to know that a patient's going to seek care even by one of your own partners. I never lost a second sleep on anything like that, and it was fortunately limited. I hope I can say it honestly to myself. But if it's not a good match, it's not a good match, whether it be a work match or a friendship match, a marriage, or a partnership in a urology practice. If it's not a good match, it's better to know that than to try to make a good match because then it's going to fail anyway.
Agree. Well, then how did you transition to the leadership roles? Were those interviews different because they're looking at your skill sets that aren't as tangible? We're not looking at how well you've treated prostate cancer, how many people you can see in clinic. We're not looking at the papers. How did that interview go?
Yeah, I think there's several things I can add to that. From the first time I became a department chair was when I was at the private practice, and we had integrated with the hospital by that time because that was in the era of the first hospital physician group mergers. And the first person who was department chair in that group walked out and said something that you might guess what he said, but he said, "I'm not going to do this anymore." And so they looked around and go, "Who else?" Well, there were only 9 people at that point. And basically it's like the old commercial, we'll give it to Steve and he'll eat anything. Mikey, he'll eat anything. And so that interview was actually pretty quick of, no one else wanted to do it. Okay, you got to do it because somebody's got to do it. When my first really formal role at Cleveland Clinic, I remember I was actually preparing or starting a cystectomy, which is not the fastest operation in the world, even though I'm known as a fast surgeon. I do my cystectomies usually in about 4 hours until I became a leader and had to stop doing those. But Andy Novak paged me, and I got on the phone. And he goes, "Hey, can you come down to my office and talk to me?" Well, Andy, my patient's asleep, and I'm about to start a cystectomy, and kind of need to be here. And he goes, "Well, just come after the case. I want to talk to you." "What do you want to talk to me about?" It's like, and for those anyone who still remembered Andy could sometimes not be the most straightforward communicator. He just said, "Well, your future." And I thought, oh my God, I'm getting fired. And so now I got to start the cystectomy. Cystectomy, not the most straightforward operation in the world. I love doing them. And so now 4 hours later, you come out and go like, I got to get down to Andy's office. Well, he wanted me to become vice chair. The current vice chair had said, I really don't want to go any further in this. I want to step down. So he said, I want you to become the vice chair of the department. That was the interview. Suddenly you're in that. When I got further on, so for example, to become department chair, it was a very different deal. You had search committees, and you had a chair of a search committee, which is that person's own entity. It was a man in that circumstance. The search committee has multiple members. You then have kind of other members of administration who think they're on the search committee, but they're not really on it. And so you're kind of trying to navigate all those different folks that you're trying to get to think that you really should be the department chair. But to the point on your question on with each of those interactions, to know is that you're on point. You're being interviewed. You're not talking in the hallway with the anesthesiologist anymore. You are in an interview, whether you realize it or not, if that person's on the search committee or fill in the other blanks on that. And those interactions, some formal, some informal, are a key part when you're going to try to get to that level of leadership. To get to be department chair, you have to lay out a vision. And that's kind of often, people are derisive. Well, vision, it's all, up there. No, it means really, what do I see happening? If I'm going to be the department chair, what will I see that my impact on the department would be? What would its impact beyond the quality of care that we deliver? On our scholarship, on the growth of the department members and how they would become their various best versions of themselves how we would, foster our national reputation, which in that organization was an important part of being a department chair. Laying that vision out, if you're at that point in your career and interviewing, is probably the most important thing, because you've already got credibility. They know you can operate. They know you can publish if you're in an academic setting, or if you're in a non-academic setting, they know you can lead a committee on the things that you've done. But can you really show what the future ought to look like? And can you show that you think that you've got the right ideas and the right ability to influence people to get there? That's what an interview at that level, would, really comprise. And then to get into things like, to lead the system in a large organization, or to become CEO of an organization, let's face it, very few people ever are in that position. I recognize that I'm very blessed to have been in that position, but that's an almost completely different animal. And when I interviewed to be CEO of the Inova Health System, what I had to do, one, is convince people that I wasn't just that Cleveland Clinic guy. Because, if indeed they think, oh, you're just a Cleveland Clinic guy, well, they don't need a Cleveland Clinic guy. They need an Inova person. And so the same thing, to lay out a vision of, if I become CEO of this organization, here's what will happen, and here's what my priorities will be. Here are the values that I will try to bestow on the organization. And then it's no different than the thing before. They'll like you if they don't. And if that's not what they want, it's better that they know that's what you would do. Because if you say, I'll go in and turn us into one organization, but realistically either that's not possible or that's really not what you're going to do, then it's going to be a bad match and things will fail. And I remember saying to the board here, I see great opportunity here, because we had such a great foundation of just general healthcare across the physician community here. I would say second to none, well before I got here. But I said, if this is the vision you like, I believe no one will be a better person to do that. But if that's not what you would like, I will be an unmitigated disaster, because that's what I'm going to try to do. And if you don't want that to happen, it'll be a complete failure. So having that support in that circumstance of a board who bought into that vision, believed it was right, and was willing to support you in it, that was the key thing in that. And again, it went back to a relationship, of course, with that board. Because when I came in and we had started major transformation, had I not had the board 100% behind me, we couldn't have done the things that we've done.
That's so true. I feel also that there is a dichotomy in healthcare, period, especially with physicians. The physicians who are boots on the ground, working day to day, seeing the patient, and the leadership. And people feel that there's a disconnect. And like you said before, people aren't working as hard. As a leader, you know that is not true. You put in many hours that people will never see. Can you talk about some of the challenges and rewards of being in leadership?
Yeah, so let's go back to the first one, because I think when I speak to physicians about leadership, I think the first thing to start is you have no choice on this. You are a leader. So if you don't want to be a leader, too bad. You shouldn't have gone to medical school. You're a leader in that room with that patient and that family. You're a leader with that team, whether you're in the OR, for us with all the folks in an OR. You're a leader whether you want to be a leader or not. That doesn't mean you need to be a people or team leader. That's a different deal. So I think that's important to establish, by the way. And then I'm sorry, Axel, lost where you went with the first part of the question. Oh, to be a senior leader, yeah. First of all the old jokes about it's lonely, they're all true. And it may or may not be obvious to the listener, but you and I are recording this right after the big Microsoft outage, in which at 3:30 in the morning I get a call of what's happening. By 6 in the morning, I'm walking the halls, and I'm in our transfer and high reliability center, and we're trying to navigate a whole bunch of things there, and no one has all the answers. In fact, most people don't have any answers, and they're all looking to you to have the answers, and that you don't. So you have to call on others is the key piece there. In any given situation, barring there's something about running an operating room, for example, I know less than a lot of the people in the room, but I have the credibility to call the right experts in and hold them accountable and ask the hard questions. That's kind of the key function of that senior leader. But back to again, the loneliness, it is indeed hard to be in these positions, because as another department chair told Andy, as I became department chair, by the way, is that you soon realize you have no friends. As a leader, it's not about being people's buddies. It's about helping assure that in that circumstance, the department or the health system in aggregate is the very best it can be and assures the best care for the patients. But you're not there to be a buddy. You are there to indeed push that, and that's hard because as we all go up, the folks who are at the scrub sinks, joking about each other's sports teams or joking about what each other's hobbies are. At some point you have to not be the buddy. You have to be the okay. My job is to make sure that we in aggregate move forward as we said that we would. And that's hard because when you were buddies before and now you're not buddies anymore, that can be a hard thing. And I think often people that do underestimate when they go into these type leadership roles. And in that circumstance, the advice I would give for those of you who are at that point of your career is to amazing. Goes back to relationships. Find other department chairs. Find other department chairs that may not be urology chairs. Maybe they're the folks who are in your own organization or folks that you met through, you remember back from medical school, and lean on those relationships at a time where you can't go to your buddies because they're not your buddies anymore. They're your staff and you got to hold them accountable. And sometimes, frequently, that's not any fun.
I think that's excellent advice. I think that it's lonely up on top is very, very accurate, and people don't actually recognize that until they get to that point. But I'm very thankful that you did share that you did find a network, someone to not really vent to, but to be able to discuss the issues and the problems that you're going through, because you can't discuss that with your old friend group anymore, because now you are tasked with leading them, and there's certain things that are going to be confidential and not for public disclosure that you cannot share. So I really appreciate the fact that you were able to vocalize seeking out a peer group that's maybe outside of our field, but at least having those conversations so you don't keep it bottled to yourself.
Right.
That's important. Well, this has been amazing. I think you have a very, very wide experience through many different, I would say, cultures, geography, practice settings, and now you're running a very, very um, a, a program that is exceptional. Since I'm from the local area, it is well known across the country, and you are a urologist. So appreciate that and all of your experiences. So, do you have any final tips or takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah, I think so. As far as those of you who are going into your first practice, yeah, I'm further away, and I hope that my comments are helpful. For those of you who are developing your leadership career, what I would say is to just be real self-aware. Go back to the authenticity piece, and think, what do I really want to do? Do I really want to be a leader? And because what I often physician or non-physician folks who are thinking about getting into leadership, I will say some version of the following, which is that the titles are really cool, but the work is really hard. And so, to have a title, name of a committee, name of a department chair, all those things, that sounds cool. And, your spouse or partner are going to love it. Your kids are going to be impressed. Your mom's going to want to see the headlines, but it's hard work. I would also say that it is hard work. It's amazingly hard work, but nothing can be more gratifying than that for the right folks. The ability to see a junior faculty member who kind of struggled early on and weren't sure whether they would need somebody to scrub on their big cases with them, who suddenly becomes not only that go-to surgeon, but becomes that person who's written a paper. You get to see them at the AUA, annual meeting, stand on the podium and talk about some of their ideas. That's incredibly gratifying. And that, you didn't have a ton to do with that. You had a little bit to do with seeing that happen. It also means that you have to be willing to let that person take that spotlight. Because I remember at one point, one of my junior faculty members, when I got asked to do some session at the AUA annual meeting, and that was fun. I love doing that stuff, still love doing that stuff. But I knew that this person really had the potential to grow and be that career academician and recognized in the AUA. And so letting that person get on the podium, and it took a little bit of attention away from you. But now, years later, even though I'm still not there, seeing that person continue to grow in the career, you kind of get to take some satisfaction going, man, there's a leverage there that even if nobody else knows it, you get to know it, and that impact can be great. So the whole point of leadership is having, others, be able to do important things, not for you. And if it's for the individual glory, there's lots of things. You can always be the one on the podium. You can get the paper. You can, do the hardest cases. But the multiplier effect of seeing those around you do that is just immeasurable for those who are willing to do the work.
Thank you very much for that. Well, thank you, Dr. Jones, for sharing your time and expertise with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate all that you and the AUA are doing on this.
And thank you to our audience for joining us today on the AUA Leadership and Business Podcast.
Thank you for joining us today on the AUA Leadership and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's insights valuable. Remember, growth is a continuous process. To further enhance your business acumen and accelerate your professional development, explore the AUA's Institute for Leadership and Business track on demand by visiting the AUA University at auau.auanet.org and simply click on the program icon. The ILB track on demand features 9 courses covering a wide range of leadership and business topics that will empower you to lead effectively and achieve your professional goals. Invest in your future by visiting auau.auanet.org and register for the ILB track on demand today. Until next time, continue to learn, lead, and excel.